Hello, we're back, and in this set of video lectures, we're going to be talking about CMS reimbursement, specifically 1500 forms and UB94 forms. UB04 forms, excuse me, had something else on my mind. So let's have a look at these. These are very important forms as CMS reimbursement is critical. Upwards to 40% of hospitals' reimbursement comes from CMS. So it's something we definitely want to get on top of in health information. Okay, and again, this is covering CMS. 1500 forms, of course, are what we use for the professional pro fee, in other words, the physician medical office billing. UB04 is typically hospital and other agencies, home health, what have you. So things we'll be talking about are just general claims things, the importance of the 1500 forms and the data entry, common source of errors, processing these secondary, because again, you can have primary and secondary insurance, as we all know. We'll look at some of the common errors, such as data entry that delay claims processing, and we'll talk about maintaining these claim files for a medical practice, and then we'll dive into the UB04 forms for hospital or facility billing, as some say. So again, these forms have completion instructions. Most of them are electronically submitted in hospitals and medical offices, right? So they have form numbers, they have the standards, right, set up. We had to update these when we went to ICD-10 so they could accommodate the longer data string for the ICD-10 CM and PCS codes. So let's do a quick knowledge check here. What is the significance of the diagnosis pointer on the CMS 1500 claim form? Give people a minute for that. You can pause the video. And again, the diagnosis pointed letters on the ICD-10 CM codes in field or block number 21 are entered on each line for which a CPT or HCPCS level 2 form is reported. So what it means and what it does is it justifies the medical necessity of these procedures or services that are provided for the payer. So in other words, we're not just ordering diagnosis tests for some speculative reason. They actually are mapped to some sort of diagnosis, sign, symptom that you've learned how to code in ICD-10 CM coding. And again, the CMS 1500 forms are professional procedures and services. In other words, the pro fee coding. UB04 are claims for inpatient and outpatient institutional procedures. And why do we fill out these forms? We fill these out to obtain reimbursement, just as you would for any other insurance claim, right? This includes physician fee-for-service, hospital, inpatient prospective payment system. And again, with this increasing tide between accurate ICD-10 CM and PCS coding and CPT HCPCS coding, that's helped raise the level of the wage structure for coders and health information management in general. And again, now, of course, CMS wants to have everybody on electronic health records. You know, we had the meaningful use, all those things that you've learned about in your other courses. CMS wants to move away from paper forms, just like the IRS, because they are labor intensive and everything else. They do have some carve outs for such things as dental claims, or if there's a disruption in electricity or communication, or if the beneficiary submits it, and other carve outs. But by and large, for the most part, these are all submitted electronically. And here's an example of our favorite form, the 1500 form. And this is also in your text, and you can see some things that we've talked about in our coursework. Just highlight a few of them. We've got, typically, like most forms, the demographic information's up top. Data service, right? We have other information, but then of course we get into diagnosis nature, dates of service, procedures, charges, all these other things that relate to what we're talking about in this class. I'm not going to dwell a lot on this slide. Again, more and more of these things are getting optimized through office automation. So we have optical character recognition, OCR software, which basically converts a scanned image of a letter or a string of text into machine encoded text so the computers can read them. And if we do data entry for claims forms, we have requirements. This includes the patient and policyholders' names, the NPI. Every physician that is eligible for reimbursement by CMS has a unique identifier, an NPI number. And every hospital or other entity has a national standard employer identifier, which is an EIN. The other things to think about, there's a difference between assigning benefits versus accepting assignments. So people kind of think of these the same way. And of course, the next to last bullet point, reporting the ICD-10-CM, HCPCS Level 2, and CPT. Physician offices in particular seem to be more focused on the HCPCS and the CPT, and they forget that if they don't have the correct ICD-10-CM code, it's all for naught. It doesn't matter. Anyway, the claim gets rejected and your reimbursement is therefore delayed. We talked about assignments of benefits, and this is in block, or as some people refer to it as field 13, and this has a signature. So either the signature is on file typically, and so what this is telling the payer, in this case CMS, is to directly reimburse the provider. When we accept an assignment, that's a little different. That's in block 27. So therefore, if the X is in the block, the provider is agreeing to accept the payment in full. In other words, whatever the payer reimburses, that's what they will accept. So people kind of talk about these things interchangeably when they're actually a little bit different. Now let's take a look at another knowledge check. So in this case, we have a partially completed 1500 form, and the patient's name is Natalia Markov, M-A-R-K-O-V, Natalia, N-A-T-A-L-I-A. Date of birth is May 10th, 1995. So let's take a look here and see what are some of the errors. Here's the second part of it, or actually the whole thing all in one block. So again, Important to follow all instructions on the form. So let's take a look at these errors. There are actually 7 of them. Let's see how many of them you can get. Well, again, following instructions is critical. Here it says in block 2, last name, first name, middle initial. That didn't happen here. Block 3, we talk about the patient's birth year. It should be 1995. And then again, block 4, more problems. You have to enter the names exactly as they ask you to. Last name, comma, first name, comma, middle initial. That didn't happen. Then we have block 5. We don't enter punctuation like this. We have to type out the whole thing, street, or just ST. And then finally, we have block 7. All right, number, street. And with the zip, again, no hyphen. So those are some of the errors that you can see here. Again, these are incredibly. And again, important to think about primary insurance, secondary insurance. Primary on top, on the first row is marked here. And then the secondary, in other words, supplemental insurance goes as indicated below. And again, people thought that with electronic claims processing, all these things would go great, but we still have errors. And one of the biggest causes of delayed claims is keyboarding errors, incorrect data entry, not putting the commas, not following the instructions on the form, missing data. If we have attachments that don't have patient and policy identification, we have handwritten items other than populating the blocks where the OCR software works, right? We have failure to link procedures or services with diagnosis. Remember, CMS is expecting anything that we do to be mapped to a diagnosis, or if not a full-fledged diagnosis, certainly a sign or symptom, one of those R codes that you'll learn more about as they start the letter R in the chapter that deals with coding signs and symptoms. So again, I'm not going to have you guys do this. This is pretty straightforward, right? In terms of policies and procedures, data entry. Now we have software that kind of checks for these things, and hopefully with the intent of eliminating or decreasing the number of errors. So now we're ready to submit a claim. What do we need to do? Most important, double check the claim for any errors or omissions, attach any necessary attachments, post the submission of the claim to the patient account so it's not open, maybe get the patient double billed again. And then we save the claim in the practice management software, and then we finally submit the claim to the clearinghouse. And that's it for right now. Our next video lecture will cover facility claims with the UB form. That's all I have for you. We'll see you online.